millions of homes. A man loved a woman, a child it was born. It learned how to hurt and it learned how to cry like humans do.
Hi, and welcome to the 237th Tommy Rocket Show. I'm Tommy Rocket here with my guests, and this show is expressly dedicated to my friend Joyce. She's one of our biggest supporters. I want to thank her for all the years she's been watching, and keep on watching Joyce. Today we're here with Rebecca Reed. She's been a labor attorney for the past 2 decades, and Dr. Timothy Rivinus is a child psychiatrist and an expert in Veterans Affairs. And as you know, we're also here with Peter Phipps, my co-host. So Peter, tell us, where have we come to today? What's the topic? What's the hot button?
Bullies.
Bullying.
Bullies.
Bullying.
And bullying. And we all have personal stories. Hope we all get to a few, because
it's a hot
you don't
topic.
have to think back to childhood to have a bullying story. At least I know in my case. But it's everywhere. Everybody seems to be talking about it, seems to be worried about it. So why is it always been with us, and why is it so pervasive?
I'll take a shot at that. This is human hierarchy. This is about who's on top and who's on bottom, and
You mean like a caste system?
Yeah, like a caste system. This is the way we humans are, and people are looking for dominance as a way of holding on to power, and that means authority, and so they can run the show. But you have to have an enlightened system if you're not going to hurt people, and bullying is when the system goes wrong.
You know, we all think, I think first off, maybe a while ago we thought of schoolyard, but I think now we think of internet or something. But Rebecca, it's in the workplace. It doesn't leave us, right? We can't escape it.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
what are typical workplaces?
It's on the internet. It's everywhere you go. But in the workplace, I mean, it can happen employee on employee. It definitely happens with leadership to their subordinates, just to make sure they stay in line. It happens to people generally in the workplace, I think everywhere, where you're kind of targeting somebody who's a little bit different and not, you know, on the same path as you. But it certainly can be very harmful and can make people have to leave jobs that they really like because they just can't tolerate the bullying. And when it's your boss, it's hard usually to stand up to your boss and then have to come back and work for them the next day after you filed a complaint against them. So most people just will opt to leave.
Yeah, I never filed a complaint against my boss, but I was yelled at a lot. And I would just sort of, I realized, I think I just sort of absorbed it. And then I'd be walking around the neighborhood trying to let it out.
Is yelling bullying? Yelling at employees that work beneath you?
I think you have to have an idea of what bullying is.
Yeah.
First, if you feel hurt by it, if you feel demeaned by it, if you feel that you're not a person, that you're somehow less than, then that's bullying. On the other hand, if you're in a shouting culture, I don't know whether newspapers are like that, but you know, they used to be.
That's not what I was talking about, but right, I mean, for example, expletives are just a standard verb to describe everything in newsrooms. People get very excited because it's an excitable profession.
Deadlines.
But I really wasn't talking about, I'm talking about someone who just tried to exert power by ordering me to do things, and I would never refuse, but oftentimes I wouldn't do them. You know, that was my way out. But
Was this your boss?
Yeah. So, but who's the target? Do you know that? I mean, Rebecca, can you spot people they're going to be targets? And if I'm responsible for legal affairs, and so there's going to be a situation here.
I don't know that you can spot who the targets will be, and it often is difficult because there's a phrase that you say where you have leaders who kiss up and kick down. So all the other leaders think they're these magnificent, wonderful leaders because they're not the ones getting kicked, and the ones getting kicked don't feel like they have the power to say something and actually get something done to make it change. So I think most people just take the kicking and assume that that's what they have to tolerate in the workplace, but it shouldn't be that way.
And what about vulnerable people? How does the bully spot them?
It's usually a difference. People are seen as less than. And you can take racial groups, or you can take age, gender. The bully will look for somebody who they feel deserves to be called less than what he or she is. And those differences go across society.
And does the bully do that because the bully wants power? Is that what we said? Or?
Well, that's one way to get power, is to demean somebody who's the other, who's not you. You're the standard for what's right, and they are wrong, or they deserve to be hurt. That kind of mentality.
You know, it's a kind of thing that first ladies take on as a cause, bullying. Melania Trump took it on, which is always sort of
super ironic.
Don't you think? But does that do any good? That kind of, do you think what we're doing has any way of helping? Will it help people who are bullies, or can we touch people who feel vulnerable and need some way to defend themselves? I mean, Timmy, do you think Rebecca, do you think we can, how can we help people?
I think with any issue, the more light you can bring to it, the more likely you can do something to help it. And you know, I was reading up on the types of laws that exist to help prevent bullying. Mostly they're just in schools at this point around the country. There's been legislature introduced in over 30 states for a workplace bullying provision where you could bring a civil action if you're bullied without having to be in a protected class. Anybody could bring it. But in the school setting, I forgot what the question was.
Well, I think that you're answering a question, and that is, can we do any good? And one thing you're saying is we can bring light to the fact that there are harassment laws and bullying laws.
But also what you should do if you see bullying, or if you're a victim of bullying, and it's really all about telling, right?
Right.
So the school laws that we have in Rhode Island is if you see somebody being bullied, you have to tell somebody. And if you don't, you can be disciplined for not telling somebody.
And you could report that anonymously if you wanted to.
You can report it anonymously.
So,
yes.
Tommy, you've told the story about being the genius in the 7th grade science class.
Oh boy, yeah. No,
but,
that was,
so
you want me to tell that?
You tell the story, but then also,
Okay.
did anyone come to your defense when you were?
No.
What's the story?
Well, I was back in '69, and I was in a junior high school in Rhode Island, and I was a pretty good student when it came to sciences, and I was always answering the question, standard classroom. Teacher would say, okay, what's this planet, or what's this have to do with astronomy? I always raise my hand and answer, and I did it a lot, I guess, because I was curious and I wanted to learn. I was a very curious kid, and I just thought you answered if you knew the answer, and that's it. And one day I got taken outside the classroom by the class bully, I guess he was, and he said, you know, Tommy, you better stop answering all the questions because you're making the other kids look stupid. He goes, and if you keep doing this, we're going to take you out back and beat the F out of you. So next time the teacher asks you a question, you keep your mouth shut. And I was really scared. And so he did it covertly. There were no witnesses, you see. And I was pretty scared, so I kept my mouth shut. And then one day, the teacher took me aside and she said, what's the matter? You're not answering any of the questions in class. Did you suddenly get stupid or something? And I was too ashamed and frightened.
You didn't
and
say
I was
anything.
bullied into not learning and participating as much as I wanted to, because this person was, maybe for whatever reason, I was young, I was 12, I didn't understand.
Do you think the school administration, the teacher, knew that this was happening, or was this?
I think she was suspicious.
She was suspicious
That something was going on because I changed.
She do anything about it?
I don't remember. Honestly, I don't. She may have done something without telling me. I don't know, because it was so many years ago.
Yeah.
I don't. But I do remember reporting this to my academic advisor at the time. And he listened to me with a very sympathetic air, and he said, Tommy, he goes, kids will leave you alone. He goes, but just try not to be a giraffe amongst ponies.
Yeah, see, I hear that as he is knuckling under to a system that is a covert system that's below him, but the bully, the guy who took you out or threatening to take you out back and have other people beat you up, is acting as an authority figure and is getting away with it.
Yes.
And that's when a system can become a bully. And Peter, you mentioned the current political system we're living in. We're living in a bullying culture that's coming right down from the top. This is, mince no words about it. We have people who are driving towards a fascist, authoritarian culture right now.
You know, there is an example going back a couple presidents, the Monica Lewinsky case.
Right.
And so she was a victim, and she was vulnerable, but the bullying came later when, as she tells it, and about 10 years ago she stood up.
There's a wonderful program, isn't there, on
TED Talks.
Yeah.
Or something. And she basically said, I was bullied, and people profited from humiliating me on social media. And it was a circle of clicks and capitalism and shame. And so here she was finally standing up and saying it and talking about it. But Rebecca, don't most people do what I did in my case? And Tommy, nothing.
It's just easier to conform and keep your head down and hope you don't get yelled at that day.
Right.
Hope you don't get yelled at in front of your other fellow employees.
I mean, when you're a kid, you have no choice because you're powerless. You can't just walk out of school. You have to go there every day and face this. You know, I think in marriages, women get bullied by men and vice versa. You know, it's not just gender specific. But I think that when you're an adult, you have more options than when you're a child. So I think, you know, dealing with bullying has a lot to do with how old you are, too, and how much money you have. I mean, people that don't have to work don't have to worry about being bullied at work. You know, money insulates you from society in a way. But we'll get back to that when we come back for the second segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. So stay tuned.
To bring it?
I forgot it.
Forget it.
Next time, don't forget it. And every time, make it part of the relationship.
A latex condom used consistently and correctly prevents the spread of HIV, the virus that causes AIDS, and may save your life.
Hi, and welcome back to the second segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. As you know, we're here with Rebecca Reed, Dr. Timothy Rivinus, Peter Phipps. What were we talking about when we ended the first segment?
Bully culture.
The bully culture.
And, you know, we've talked otherwise. Timmy, you brought this up. It's in our animal DNA, right? I mean, it's certainly in all mammals. I mean, Rebecca, you have dogs. You have two of them? Does one bully the other one?
The little one bullies the big one.
Really?
Yeah.
And what's the purpose of this?
Yeah, what does the little one get out of it? Yeah.
For her, I feel like it's bully or be bullied. She's little, so she's like, I'm going to exert my authority over you so that you don't kill me.
So bullying is about control, being control.
It's interesting because the small dog is the top dog. We have these expressions, underdog and top dog. So the one who's physically under, where's that come from? The bigger, usually with humans, bigger people tend to bully the smaller ones.
Right, unless you have one of those complexes, like that little general in France.
Yeah.
That is
the Napoleon
stereotype
complex.
that does live up to itself sometimes.
Or unless you go to the Charles Atlas classes and then sock out the guy who, you know, who was taking your girlfriend away.
So, but the underlying.
Territory.
So we're in a bully culture. I think you would maybe say we've always been where these animals were always going to be in this bully culture, but then there is a culture outside of that. And there's harassment laws, and there are laws against assault and battery, and there are sort of proper ways to behave in groups. And we're going to try to get to some of that at the end. But so let's take on the vulnerable and the bullied. So what are 5 things? What are 2 or 3 things that you can do if you're being bullied or Or how do you defend yourself? How do you get through life?
How do you respond? What's the correct way to respond to bullying without getting hurt or losing your job? You know?
Well, maybe we can draw on our own personal experiences in this, how we've been successful and how maybe we haven't been successful. I think you both brought up the topic of that you have to know when you're being bullied. You have to know the diagnosis, and then what can you do about it is the question. My first suggestion is don't be alone. Never worry alone. If you have the idea that something's happening to you, talk to somebody. Talk to somebody you can trust. Talk to somebody who may know something about it.
And Rebecca, in the workplace, where do you go?
If it's your boss that's doing it, you probably don't want to go to your boss. So most larger businesses would have a human resources department. If it's a smaller business and the only person that can handle things is your boss, if it's a small business, it's not a bad idea to talk to your coworkers about it and see, if they're going through the same thing and maybe coming together to the boss as a group. This is how unions are often formed, because you'll have a bad boss, and we always
you can go to your union store
say
or
in
something.
the trade that
and you can file a grievance.
The union they deserve, right? So if you're a bullying boss, you could end up with a union because you're not treating your employees well. So that's one thing you could do. If you can't go to your boss, you could go to a union and see if they'll represent you if you have at least 3 employees.
But there's not a law, right? There's harassment laws if it's on a defined class.
Correct.
So explain what a defined class means.
So if you're in a protected class, so I'm in 2, I'm over 40 and I'm a female, but there's state laws about discrimination and there's federal laws about discrimination. Generally, states expand a little wider, but women, people who are gay, people for their religion, their color, race, gender, all of those things are protected classes. If you're over 40, that's protected class from age discrimination. So basically, if you're in one of those classes, I had a situation where I had a boss who was a terrible bully, and he was a terrible bully to everybody. And because I'm a lawyer and I know what I'm doing, I was able to frame a really good argument that his bullying of me was gender discrimination, and I ended up getting him terminated. I got myself terminated in the process, and that's one thing that's sad when you stand up to a bully. Sometimes you end up, either you go overboard and you get yourself into trouble because you punch them in the face, or you get to a point where you've just, it wasn't like I just made one report and he was fired. I made one report and then I got retaliated against by him, and then I reported that, and I just wouldn't let it go. And retaliation is a really horrible thing as well. It's very illegal as well. So if you make a gender discrimination claim, whether there's any validity to it or not, if your boss then comes in and starts treating you differently, which my boss did, he actually told me that I was hurting the company by making the complaint that I made. That as a lawyer, I should know that hurts the company. And I'm like, you should know that what you're doing right now is retaliation, and that hurts the company even more. Took no responsibility for his behavior, didn't change at all. So I was able to keep at it, and like I said, got him fired. But I don't think everybody knows how to do that, right?
But then how did you get fired? You were the champion.
She was an upstart.
Yeah, I had to keep showing. It got to the point where I had to take a leave of absence because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
So while the leave of absence was going on, a little settlement. Actually, they brought in a third party, like an outside counsel attorney, to do a whole investigation, and that's when he got terminated, and I got an offer.
So you got a little severance or something.
Yeah.
Timmy, let me ask you: is there a correlation between bullying and narcissism?
Oh, for sure. The definition of a narcissist is somebody who thinks about herself or himself and doesn't take anybody else into account.
And then, therefore, they would bully in order to...
We have lots of examples of people who are out for themselves only and pay absolutely no attention to anybody else in the room. They suck up all the oxygen. We have lots of billionaires who are doing this. We have lots of politicians who are doing this. And then we've all been talking about how this can happen on our own workplace. And sometimes 2 people or more pay a price for it.
Now, I would say, you've been a physician, you've worked in hospitals and private practice. You weren't bullied at the workplace. I'm thinking just people like Tommy and I get bullied, right?
Oh, there's all levels of bullying within medical systems.
Yeah.
The classic example is that doctors bully nurses and nurses bully doctors.
Do they?
Back again. Well, look, you're working hand in hand with these folks, but they're separate identities. They have their own hierarchies, and they're going to protect themselves. And doctors talk about narcissism. There are a lot of narcissistic doctors who just think they're on top of the pile. And so it's no surprise that nurses are going to feel the same way, because that's the way they learn to fight back.
So you all should be on the lookout for the bully.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think if information gets put into the workplace and into schools about what bullying is, do you think that if bullies see this coming out, that they'd be less likely to do it? Or just like if information gets put out into communities about bullying, do you think that awareness, people would see more about bullying, it would make bullies bully less?
Awareness is key. You have to be aware at all levels. It's like democracy. You have to be able to fight for it, because somebody's going to take over if you don't fight for it. Same thing with being bullied. You have to know when it's happening, and you have to know when to call it, and then get help for it, if you can. Rebecca brought up an example where her head had to roll just because there was a overarching philosophy that she needed to be punished for the bullying that was going on
Because the
towards her.
retaliation actually went up to our boss. Our mutual boss started retaliating against me as well, because I wouldn't let it go. I'm not going to take this anymore.
And the boss, come on, Rebecca, right? Okay, enough,
Yeah.
right? Isn't
And
it
then,
okay
and
now?
they were just nitpicking every little thing that I did, in a way. I was always hands off, do your job, you're
They wanted you
professional.
gone. They wanted
me
you
gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never experienced that.
It's sad about being bullied at work, because this is your livelihood. I mean, if you have to lose your job to be the person you need to be, what happens when you lose your job and there's no money?
Right.
That's horrible.
I don't have a husband. I didn't have family that could support me. I was supporting myself 100%. So
Yeah, and so what do you do then? And it makes you think about speaking out, which is terrible.
Right.
Because, you're just trying to defend yourself just to be treated correctly, and if you do, you could lose your livelihood. And that's never fair.
In your case, did you get back in another corporate situation, or did you change the way you did work?
I did. And it didn't take me long to leave that corporate position either.
Yeah.
And I felt some bullying, both, so as a female working in labor, many times I would be the only female in the room. So, like Tim was saying, they always pick out the odd man out, the weak person that they see. And there would be some scenarios where people would welcome me. They'd be so delighted to have a female presence in the room, and others made it so it couldn't be more clear that they did not want me there.
Because your job was to find common ground in some of these negotiations.
Right. Yeah.
And you had to have the respect of everybody to make that work. If you weren't getting it, it must have been impossible.
Yeah, no, it definitely made it a lot more challenging. And I could handle it all day and night when it was the union, because that was their job, right? To make me the corporate labor attorney out.
You were the
to be
face
jerk.
of the boss,
Yeah.
right?
And I could take that all day and night. But when it would be my own people that I worked with that would start doing it, that's where it just crosses a line for me that I couldn't put up with it.
And
But
was
I
there
getting yelled at recently at a job that I had recently, and just couldn't. That was it. Don't yell at me. I'm a grown woman. You're a grown man. You could talk to me like a professional.
So that's what happened in Chapter 2.
Yeah. I didn't even make a complaint, though. I just left.
Yeah.
Because I'm done. I'm done making complaints. I've done my time. I have other stories, too.
Well, if you can get to the point where you don't need to deal with it anymore, that's great, right?
But not everybody's there, and that's the problem. And getting back to your point, I think that we're never going to stop bullying. There's always, like you said, it's the animal kingdom. It happens in schools and jobs and every place else. But having the awareness and giving people the tools of where they need to go.
Yes.
When it's happening.
Yes. And it's really sad to think that, people are being bullied and don't even know they're being bullied. They just don't understand what's happening or why they feel bad, or it's just sad. But anyway, we'll get back to that when we come back for the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show once again.
It would be nice if latex condoms were automatic. But since they're not, using them should be. Simply because a latex condom used consistently and correctly will prevent the spread of HIV.
Hi, and welcome back to the third segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. As you know, we're here with Peter Phipps, Rebecca Reed, and Dr. Timothy Rivinus. Peter, where are we now at the half point? What were we discussing, or beginning to discuss?
Well, I thought the logical thing would be to start talking about the so what. How are people hurt by being bullied? What is the
damage done?
The damage done. So, Dr. Rivinus, you're on.
Well, this is a trauma story, isn't it? This is psychological trauma. Maybe even more. If this is a labor dispute, sometimes they take out the brickbats and go after you. I recall a couple of the unions transporting beer. There'd be big fights between the one union doing the Bud Light and the other union doing Narragansett. And there was a bridge out in Massachusetts where they dumped kegs over onto the Narragansett trucks. This is sort of, this is warfare, and it's territorial warfare. So it's important to be able to see that there's something going on before you reach the authorities. And that was one that actually went to one of the superior courts, as I recall.
But, Monica Lewinsky talked about what damage. She became depressed. She was ashamed of herself.
Yeah.
In this case that's been, it's come around.
Yeah.
But
so
what's it lead to? Depression? Does it lead to low self-esteem? Where does it take you?
Well, the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are a wide group of symptoms. One is, we've talked about earlier, just getting mad at the system, getting mad at the person you're being bullied at. And then if you retaliate within the system to somebody who's bullying you without going through the system, then you can get blamed. So anger, depression, withdrawing into oneself, saying nothing, not able to defend yourself, then with all the symptoms of depression, not sleeping, loss of energy, loss of appetite, loss of willingness to live. It can be a pretty desperate situation. Denial is another defense in post-traumatic stress disorder. If you numb it all out, then it's not there. And you mentioned alcohol and drug abuse. There's a way of numbing things out. So a lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder are self-medicating to get away. The last two I would mention is anxiety, just being on guard in the fight-flight mode all the time, or just quitting. And that's what psychosis is all about. People just quit. Their minds quit. They can't deal with the stress of this, and that's often where people lose it.
Is bullying, is one of the effects, when children, school-age children get bullied, is one of the things the damage is done, is that what created these school shootings? Like Columbine and everything? Weren't those kids bullying victims that did all the shooting? That's an extreme case, I know, but...
Well, no, there are lots of extreme cases now. It's not, it's an epidemic, particularly with weapons so easily available and high output weapons. These are, weapons of mass destruction, these AK-47s and these weapons that can be adapted to be semi-automatic weapons. So a weapon doesn't deceive. It's a way of temporarily settling a score, but ultimately it's a huge wound to everybody, and it's a defeat. It means that the system has broken down. It's very sad, and kids are often, the victims.
And these kids that come to school with guns and do the shooting, is that a response to bullying?
It can be. Or it can be, but the bullying can come from anywhere. It can be perceived bullying by their parents. It can be perceived bullying by the school if they're not doing well and somebody's not identifying the fact that they're having trouble in school, socially, academically. There's a problem. And if people aren't onto the problem, then that's when people get desperate.
Right. And so you could have slugged that boss of yours, Rebecca.
And ended up in jail.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be sitting here prosperously moved on. But I mean, so that's.
I'm happy.
The response is not more violence, I obviously, and certainly not some spontaneous act of anger. It doesn't do you much good. But
I think
even in the younger mind, though, you could see where if they've been taking bullying, that they might just at some point snap, right? And then they snap, and then they get in trouble, as opposed to the people who've been bullying them.
Right.
And sometimes they go to jail because they shot up the school, or.
And then of late we've become, unfortunately, very aware of cyberbullying and self-violence. Like, I suppose the suicide, there's some infamous cases, self-mutilation, I suppose also. Someone is taking it out, their pain out on themselves. Those, right? I mean, what do you do with a case like that where someone is so, they've taken that loathing and taken it inside of them? What can you do for those?
What do you call that?
Well, you mentioned cyberbullying. I mean, if you want to focus on the cyber part of it, one of the problems with bullying over the internet is that whoever the person is often alone with the technology. If the parents don't know what's going on, if you're a young person, or if you're an older person who's trapped in a system that you can't get out of, say in some cult or other, you are bombarded with false information, and you can get caught in that system. And if nobody can direct you out of the closed system, then you're in trouble. That's one of the problems with cyberbullying now. It's an isolated system. It started in the early part of this century, and it's just getting worse. The impact on young people is considerable. There are suicides. There are young people who come to people like me because they're feeling tortured and they are being tortured over the internet, over systems that they could get into. Let me mention one thing. There's a very useful book by a man named, a psychologist, a New York psychologist. But his name is Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. It's a very useful book about the usurping of the nervous system by the internet system. And we talked earlier about how the economy can get caught up in this. The cyber systems and things like Facebook or communication systems are making a lot of money by having people use the system with ill will. So
they humiliate someone, they get a click, on, and it goes around in a cycle like that.
Yeah.
And when you're getting bullied through your telephone, there are no witnesses, usually.
Nope.
And
you're there,
and the bully is anonymous.
It can be.
Yeah, that's more dangerous. When I was young, when you got bullied, a lot of the times, it was in a group, It was, or it was 3 or 4 guys bullying one kid. So there was a group there.
Well, Peter brought up Monica Lewinsky. Look at the group pile-on there was on Monica Lewinsky. She was just unbelievable number of assaults over the internet after you know, she was involved in the incident she was involved in 1998.
Yeah, and she I think found help. And the way she describes herself today, she's able to stand up and defend herself and put a finger on what happened and what it did to her and what she feels like now. But
didn't she describe for years she was locked in the closet?
Yeah, and shame, filled with shame. And now she can, you know, she kind of talks about it. But
and it makes you wonder, what would these people gain by doing that to her? I mean, it doesn't even make sense.
Well, that's that's the motivation. Why are you a bully? Because you get some power out of it. You get some status among other bullies when you're on the internet, because your remarks getting hits, and that's generates the cycle of advertising audience and all that, you know.
Sadism is with us. People will gang up on people. And wherever there's a sadist, there's somebody who's being victimized.
It's an ugly side of human nature, I guess. Yep. But we'll discuss that when we come back for the 4th and final segment of the Tommy Rocket Show.
Hi, I'm Joe Perry. And Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, here for RAD. Recording artists, actors, and athletes against drunk driving. Never let someone you know get behind the wheel if they've been drinking. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hi, and welcome back to the 4th and final segment of the Tommy Rocket Show. We're having a lot of fun here today in the studio with Rebecca Reed, Dr. Timothy Rivinus, and of course Peter Phipps, my co-host and plenipotentiary of the Tommy Rocket Show. So Peter, where do you want to pick up in the 4th segment?
Well, we're going to complete the circle, and we're going to get to remedies.
Remedies.
So one of the things, Timmy, you found online was the anti-bullying charter, which is out there.
Isn't that nice? Yeah. It means that people are thinking about this in systems, their school systems. These are educational programs that are practiced throughout the world now. Some of this bullying contract came from New Zealand, by the way. So we're getting, there are people who are onto this at various levels, and they're working on it.
Right.
So it's not an unknown, the way it was back in your day, Tommy, at school, where you felt left alone.
Right. The answer, and you know what's not in here? There are giraffes and there are ponies. You don't want to be a giraffe. It's not in here.
No.
But I can see, I want to read this, and
well,
some of these.
Well, that's a betrayal. There wasned, that guy didn't have the goods.
No, and that system was wrong.
Opposite way you should react to a kid coming.
Right. I mean, if you're, I don't know how many things I've been through, seminars with the lawyer at the company, and they're telling you how to avoid discrimination matters, and so you have to go through training, right? Well, have you run any of those kind of trainings?
I have not done anti-bullying training, no.
But you've done discrimination, any of those classes, right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing that, I think you have the ponies and the giraffes are that line.
The dog and pony show.
Hopefully, when you're at that meeting and that I just tell kids that they're giraffes and they're ponies, and they got to not be a giraffe.
Be friends.
Okay, so here's the list. Listens. All pupils and parents and carers are listened to. Listen. Okay, that's number one. Includes everyone should be included in the process of dealing with the problem and participate fully in all aspects. Respects. There's respect. Challenges all forms of discriminatory language whenever you hear it. If you're in a position of authority in an organization, you spot that, and finally celebrates difference.
Right, and if your counselor, for instance, Tommy, could have asked you, what's going on here? what do you think I can do to help you with this?
Back
You're
then,
being
they
bullied.
didn't want to know. They didn't want to know for probably a few different reasons. What they were basically telling me was, don't be different than other people, and then you won't be bullied.
Right. And
Right.
that violates at least 4 points on the charter right there.
It's just like saying,
Perfect example.
expect to be bullied if you appear to be different.
So we've made progress on this. You were caught in a system where people didn't know what was going on, or they knew and didn't know what to do, or didn't have the courage to do anything, didn't know this was a civil rights issue, that you needed to be protected. You were a minor then, and that's changed now. Bullying will continue. I think that's really important to know. It'll continue forever, as long as we're on the globe. But what do you do about it? Have you got resources to fight back?
Now, in your case,
What did I do?
Well, no, but let me just put something in context here. You were in middle school in the 70s?
Late 60s,
Okay.
early 70s.
All right. And you were clear that there was a sense of difference about you, right? I mean, you had
Yes, there was. It was not only that I felt different, I appeared to be different, because a lot of my behavior would have been considered overt. Overtly different, overtly gay, however you want to say it.
Okay.
It was different, and when you are identified as being different, you are bullied. You're attacked, you're separated. For some reason, kids tend to separate.
You're the other.
You're the other, and therefore you become the bully, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's really nothing you can do, because you're a minor, you have to go to school, you know, and I think that because I had to go to school, the only thing I had that gave me a sense that I was going to be okay and not go crazy was that I tried to keep myself leaning toward people that affirmed me for who I was. Try to hang out with kids that it didn't matter to. Try to make myself part of a group where I felt I could identify with, that were not quite just like me, but were sympathetic, which is difficult to do when you're 12 years old.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't have a big group to draw from, or...
How about your parents? They were first generation in
They were
this
first
country.
generation people, and I didn't, when I was bullied, I was very ashamed of what was going on. It was so painful, it was very difficult to talk about, and I didn't tell my parents because I was ashamed. That probably for a bunch of different reasons, that I didn't want them to worry. I knew my mother cared about me, and I didn't want her to worry about me. So I think I took on a lot of that burden of keeping it to myself, so I didn't want my mother to feel bad. My father wasn't really involved in a lot of what went on in school with, myself and my sister. So I think that I was really alone a lot of the times in dealing with this. When you're 12 years old, you don't have a lot of resources to draw from, especially back then, where there were no resources to draw from for children.
Did you fear that you might be retaliated against by the bullies if you had told on them?
Oh, I was retaliated against, because a lot of times I did try to fight back, and I was retaliated against. And it was difficult, which created a lot of stress and everything. But like I said, I just tried to lean toward people that seemed to be sympathetic toward me.
Yeah.
Which made me develop a group of, I don't know what you'd call them, kids that were different. And there was always 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I never really thought I was different, because someone said to me one day, "Did you always think you were different?" And I said, "No, I thought I was just like every other kid until people started to attack me."
But
when
you
you
kept your sense of meaning, that you were somebody who needed to be respected and affirmed, and you found people who could help you do that.
I did, because I knew that I was pretty amiable, and I got along with everybody. I knew that I wasn't evil. I always thought these bullies are evil and they're mean, and I used to, I don't know where I got the idea that, or the perspective to understand that at least I'm not like these bullies. If nothing good is happening to me, at least I know I'm not like them.
That's a good defense. I mean, if you felt ashamed, then that implies that you feel you're bad all the time. But you flip that around by finding people who made you feel affirmed and that you didn't need to be ashamed.
Yeah. I was ashamed to tell my parents, though. I remember that distinctly. I was ashamed to tell them.
You think that's because they were first-generation people in this country?
No, I don't think so. I think it's because I didn't want them to think that I didn't fit in. I wanted them to think that I was just like all the other kids and doing well. You know, everybody wants to think that they're doing is just as well as the other kids. Like I said, I didn't know I was different. I thought I was just another kid in school trying to learn the best I could until people started to let me know I was not like them, and then therefore being attacked. I was attacked many times in junior high school. And let me tell you, it takes a lot of gumption to get up and go to school every day when you know there are consequences waiting for you.
So why didn't you just play vanilla, play normal?
I couldn't, because my behavior was overt and I couldn't help that. I was obviously different than other kids, and you can't hide that.
Well, people try. That's what I'm asking. But you knew that. Now, did your mother help you with that, to be yourself and to be strong about yourself?
Maybe. I don't really remember. I don't remember that. I just remember how difficult it was to go to school every day, how painful it was. How do you know? I remember saying to myself, they'd give us reading assignments in like 9th grade when they give you more work to do. I'm thinking to myself, how can I read 6 chapters when I'm worrying about getting beat up when I leave the school grounds? You know, you constantly had to worry about avoiding violence. How do you read and write and learn all these things and worry about getting beat up all the time? It's a lot for a child to gather and deal with, because we're children.
So teachers and administrators need to look at kids who are not doing well academically and saying, what's going on here?
Yes.
Is this a learning disability? Is this bullying? Is it all of the above?
Yes, because I noticed myself as I tried to avoid bullying, I found myself going to school less, bunking school. You know, I didn't want to go to school. I'd just walk the streets all day long and not tell anyone. Because who wants to go where you're bullied? Right. You know, it's just a natural response. It's like, I don't know if they call that fight or flight, but, you know, you run away from something because you don't want it.
That's what that is.
You know, and I never told anybody I was bullied because it was too painful to admit.
I'd be interested in the woman's perspective on this. Women often are treated as less than. Look what's going on in this country. Women are being blocked at every turn from getting proper medical care, being able to make decisions about their own bodies, and this is a real backlash here.
Yep,
splitting our country.
Going backwards.
Yeah, going backwards.
And I've definitely, like I said before, working in a very male-dominated industry. I think once you get to a certain level, it's kind of all male-dominated, which higher up you get. But I definitely felt, you know, I worked at a job working with the building trades, so like the IBW, the pipe fitters, cement layer, you know, bricklayers, everybody, all those, and they are stuck in the 50s. They do not want anybody who is not a white, married, Christian, straight man working in the building trades. And I was on the contractor side. And in 2019, I think it was, probably shouldn't be giving years because I can expose what I'm talking about, but I was the first woman on the contractors group that deals with this particular contract with the building trades. And like I said, I'd be the only woman in the room. I was introduced as the first woman to ever be a part of this contractor group, and the guy that led it was like, I told everybody they have to not swear. I'm like, psh, I swear like a sailor. But you know, the bullying came in where people started telling rumors about me, making me seem like I was like some sort of slut. And you know, this nearly 50-year-old woman that they're saying these things about. It really, I was just like, is it 1952 or is it 2018?
Yeah. Were they trying to bully you to force you out?
Yeah, and it worked. I actually had a vice president at the company tell me, he's like, you need to back down. This is an old boys club.
Mm-hmm, right. You know, but you made it.
I did.
And you must have found support like Tommy found support?
Yes.
Yeah. And look at Tommy. He's got this Tommy Rocket Show for 30 years or whatever it is.
I got the Tommy Rocket Show because I didn't let them take me down.
There you are. Okay.
I didn't let them take me down. And as a matter of fact, at some point during this small television career that I've had, I remember I was approached by some of the powers that be that the show was originally mostly gay topics, and I think some people didn't like it, and they came to me one day and they said, we feel that there's not enough room on the air for this type of programming. And they were bullying me to stop doing the Tommy Rocket Show, and I wouldn't.
Here we are.
Here I am 34 years later, but I have to wrap it up and thank all the guests because we've come to the end of a really great show, and I want to thank all of you guys for being so good about the whole thing and coming together today, and thank our viewing audience and our best viewer, Joyce, and thank you for watching the Tommy Rocket Show. Stay tuned, and you'll be glad you did.